So I'm here today to speak with Chip Andrews, former chairman and CEO of FMI Corporation and current managing partner of Andrews Ventures and NC State class of 1966. Thanks for joining me today, Chip. And so we're here to talk about your experience as an entrepreneur from start to finish, how you got to where you are today and led multiple successful business ventures. So to start off with, tell me about your early influences growing up and up until when you started at NC State.
Well, I have to start with mom and dad, right? We were a good, solid middle-class family. Values were important to us. And when you started putting together money and values, Mother would always say, you know, how important is that to you? And how are you going to pay for it? So I had an allowance from a very young age, but the allowance was never just quite enough. And my parents eventually said, well, get a job, you know, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So my first job was a paper route. It was just an absolutely wonderful introduction to Business 101. I had to not only deliver the papers, but I had to collect for the papers. And they paid for the paper, the retail value of the paper, and oftentimes they would also provide a tip for outstanding service. So that meant that I needed to make sure the paper was exactly where they wanted the paper, exactly when they wanted the paper, to try to enhance the revenue. Good experience.
Detail mattered even with something like paper route running.
Absolutely. It really got emphasized with a few other jobs as a kid. Maybe more importantly, later on, I worked for a men's clothing store. And I was paid an hourly wage and a percent of the sales that I was responsible for. So I started to learn something about selling. And that was very important, really, really critical in a developmental kind of way.
So why business? What really clicked with you to want to pursue that as opposed to, you know, you could have gone engineering or some other technology? What was it about business that really attracted you?
Well, that's interesting. My mother particularly emphasized grades and test scores. I mean, that was her background. And she said, you've got to have outstanding grades and test scores to be able to go to whatever college you want to go to. Right. So I followed that as a kid. She said, you know, whatever you want to study, wherever you want to go, that's fine. So I was not sure what I wanted to do. I was a finalist for the Moorhead at Chapel Hill, and I decided I really didn't want to go to Chapel Hill because engineering was what I thought was my career. I was accepted at MIT and NC State, and MIT was a little intimidating, and NC State sounded just great. So I came to State and started engineering, and it took me only about 1.5 semesters to realize that I was really interested in the business of engineering, not the science of engineering. So I switched to the Department of Economics. We didn't have Poole College of Management.
Right.
But we had a Department of Economics, which was the closest thing to business at that point for me to try to pursue.
So once you were in the then economics school, you know, what did you do while you were in college to prepare you for, you know, what you did immediately after? Were you thinking career opportunities as soon as you got into college? Were you forward thinking?
No. No, it was a journey academically and a journey professionally in college. College was an amazing experience. My grades were not what I had in high school because I was involved in so many other things. And amazingly, my parents said, that's okay, you're learning different things. In the economics department, I had great professors in microeconomics, macroeconomics, good introduction to accounting, good introduction to marketing. That was a very beneficial journey that opened up lots of opportunities for me. I think about outstanding professors, though, and one of the outstanding professors I had was Dr. Kerry Bastian, who was a former chancellor at NC State, who had gone back into teaching after he was a chancellor. And I was talking to some of my buddies about what were good courses to take, and they said, take Dr. Bastian. I said, what does he teach? Genetics. Genetics? It was just fascinating because he was so good at telling stories about how people develop. It was not a matter of the science, look it up in the book and memorize the genetic development. He said, let me tell you why and how this happened. He was mesmerizing, just a tremendous guy. And then probably the professor that was most critical for me was a guy that I had in my senior year. At that time, seniors had a senior research project. And the first semester was identifying the problem. So I spent 3 or 4 months identifying what was assigned me was what is the biggest problem that you see from a business perspective that we have at NC State? And then the second semester was, how should we fix it? The problem that I identified was our parking problem. Somehow it's still there today, right?
That's right.
So it was difficult for students, it was difficult for faculty and staff, certainly difficult for visitors. I identified that as something that over the next decade or so, the university was going to have to deal with. So in my second semester, I came up with the solutions. One of them was, we've got to start building parking decks. And I identified a spot near Reynolds Coliseum that I thought was the place for the first parking deck to be built at NC State. Amazingly, after I graduated 2 years later, they hired an engineering firm to do a pretty expensive study to determine that we needed a parking deck near Reynolds Coliseum. That was a tremendous experience. It was here's a business problem, identify it, and then spend 3 or 4 months trying to figure out how to solve it.
At what point was it where you started to think that you wanted to kind of do your own thing and follow that entrepreneurial path? It sounds like with a lot of your early jobs, you had some experience with that, even to the paper routes. But was it a switch that flipped down the road that really made you start thinking in that mindset?
The switch was Dr. Fales. Dr. Fales was a professor at NC State. I never had him in class. I really don't know why, but I never had him in class. He was a famous guy. They do Professors of the Year on a regular basis, and he won it many years because he was the guy that when the engineers were told that they had to take something outside of engineering, and they asked the other engineers what they should take, people would often say, take Dr. Fales. Doesn't matter what he's teaching. He might be teaching cost accounting. He might be teaching marketing. It doesn't matter. Just take the guy because he's really good at explaining the concept. Sort of back to storytelling again.
Right.
Really good. So Dr. Fales was doing some consulting on the side in his 40s. And generally the consulting happened because an engineer graduated from state, went into their own business. Many of them went into the construction business because civil engineering at state led to a construction opportunity. And maybe they're 5 years, 10 years out, and let's say a contractor has been doing competitive bidding and they've lost their last 6 or 7 or 8 jobs, and they say, something's wrong here. I need help. Who should I talk to? Hey, how about that professor, Dr. Fales? So a young business manager in the construction industry would come back to Raleigh and say, Dr. Fales, can you help me? He said, I don't know, but we'll see. So he would go help, generally successfully. And that guy would then go to his association meeting and tell his buddies about this Dr. Fales, who was so good and really understood the fundamentals of how business really works. And then they would invite Dr. Fales to come speak to the association. 20 people, 30 people, 40 people. So he would do a good job with a state association convention, and they would tell the national guys. And so here's a convention coming up in Las Vegas, and Dr. Fales would go to Las Vegas and speak to 800 people. And again, he was mesmerizing because he would take a business issue that they were facing and he would tell a story about positive and negative outcomes and what the differences were and what the principles were embedded in those stories. So after he would finish a speech, people would come up to him and he'd be surrounded with people asking questions. And there were so many people, they couldn't all ask the questions, so they would give him business cards that he was going to follow up with them. And being the absent-minded professor, he might send the shirt to the laundry that had 6 business cards in it and not be able to follow up. But he was developing a business model that says, if you speak and you're really good at delivering a speech, You will get people interested in what your concept is. They'll want to talk to you, and then you have a chance to make a pitch about your help. It kept on reinforcing itself throughout my career that if you're able to tell a good story, you have a big opportunity of convincing and bringing along with you the people that you're communicating with. And so he decided early in his 50s that he had a business here that could be developed. But he recognized that he didn't have the time or really the interest in trying to do it all. He needed a team. And he thought about it and he said, I really need a bunch of people that have just graduated, a bunch of aggressive, talented people that will take this charge and help me build the business. And I had an opportunity to be introduced to him. I had an opportunity to talk about it. I eventually had an opportunity to join him. And it was hard, but at the end of the day, not hard, because it said, give up your salary, but you're here to build something. And he had already developed the proof of concept. The proof of concept is you tell a great story, you get a lot of interest, you get an opportunity to make a pitch. He had already even tried what you do beyond the pitch. The pitch would be, we don't know if we have the answer, but we will do what we called a survey visit. Amazingly, in those early years, our close rate from a survey visit was maybe 80%, 85%. If you identified the right issues to be solved, and if you knew how to solve those issues, the sale was there to be made. It was just an absolutely tremendous opportunity. Now, it meant that we had a business model that was different from what an awful lot of people might think of as an entrepreneurial business model today. Mm-hmm. We had no funding, none. It was all bootstrap. In fact, Dr. Fales told those of us that were with him early, we could go to the bank and borrow money and put it in, and we'd have a little bit of percentage equity in the business. But there was no business loan. We funded the business by the profitability of what we were doing month by month, year by year, and eventually over those decades. I mean, making $1 million in sales was a huge deal for us. $1 million was eventually 2, and then 5, and then 10, and then 20, 40, 60, 80, or whatever, over many decades. But that was all built by self-funding.
So you were heavily involved with Dr. Fales early on. Outside of consulting, what other industries or fields did you get involved with early on?
Well, one of the things that Dr. Fales was particularly instrumental in was how we managed our business, FMI, internally, and then whether other opportunities we considered. But looking at other opportunities along the way became a part of the FMI opportunity. Real estate was always there. I mean, many of our clients were general contractors. They were involved in real estate. They were involved in real estate execution. Some of them were involved in real estate ownership, sometimes because they decided to, or sometimes because the developer couldn't pay them, and they were involved in real estate ownership. And so oftentimes we would get an opportunity to participate. I mean, a client would say, would you want to forego your fees and take a percentage of this deal? Mm-hmm. And so we looked at a lot of that. We said no every time. And usually the reason we said no is we're going to have conflicts of interest here. We're going to be trying to be consultants, but then on the other hand, we're trying to be owners, and we're trying to be involved as the owner of their business, but then we're trying to consult with their business. And then there are the other people that we might do business with that might be competitors of theirs. There's a problem here. But there's an opportunity in real estate. And the opportunity fundamentally is that you can create substantially more wealth in real estate than you can in consulting. And the reason's pretty simple. It's leverage. We got involved in that incrementally, step by step. Our offices, when we started FMI, were across Hillsborough Street, next to the Varsity Theater at the time. We came in the back door to the upstairs offices, and we eventually outgrew the office. And we said, we need some more space. So we said, maybe we should build a building. How much space do we need? We calculated that we probably needed 10,000, and we wanted to grow into 15,000 square feet. And so I asked, do we really want to build a 15,000 square foot building? Why don't we maybe build a 50,000 square foot building and rent out the rest? So now we're going to be using multiple leverage. Leverage of debt, but leverage of people that are renting from us as well. So we eventually ended up buying a piece of property on the other side of Crab Creek Valley. And we embarked on building a 50,000 square foot building. And when we started the concept, all we had was our own lease, which was for maybe 12,000 square feet or something. Fortunately, by the time we were about 25 or 30% complete, I was able to get Golden Corral to join us as a tenant for our entire second floor. And then before the building was complete, we rented out the third floor to a company that was located in Pennsylvania that wanted to expand their operation in North Carolina. We were fully occupied by the time we opened. Took a lot of risk away by those two big lease signings. We only needed a few more square feet down on the first floor to completely fill up that building. So that was a success. We said, you know, I like this. This feels good. Maybe we should do that in other cities where FMI is locating. We can be a tenant and we can also be an owner. And maybe we should consider other forms of real estate investments. We ended up invested in a multifamily project in Raleigh that was already in existence, and we learned a bit about multifamily and said maybe we should build our own multifamily project. And eventually we built a apartment project near Crabtree that was 220 units, which was highly successful. We said, you know, if office works and if multifamily works, maybe we should try retail. And we invested in some retail development. So over the course of a couple of decades, we got more and more involved as real estate developers, taking on additional partners, and perhaps more importantly, investing with other partners. Real estate's been very successful for us, and I really like going back and listening to other people talk about as they almost see the light bulb go on of, oh wow, that could be beneficial. I had a chance to talk with a student at NC State last week where he said, you know, I've got two roommates. We're paying rent that seems to be pretty high. If I could buy an apartment, then I could get my other two roommates to help me pay on the loan for buying the apartment. I think that the leverage of real estate might be a good thing for me to try. I said, you got it. You got it.
And so along with real estate and your other consulting ventures, it's clear you had a lot of successes early in your career. Tell me about some of the times that things didn't go according to plan.
You mean it didn't always work?
It couldn't have always.
No, it certainly didn't. I mean, it didn't always work in consulting and investment banking. It didn't always work in real estate. We had some colossal failures. I remember one of the good successes that we invested in was in the distribution of HVAC equipment. We had an opportunity to buy a distribution company. We helped to build it and grow it. It was working really well. So we said, you know, we know how to operate some of these local businesses. We need to be looking out for an opportunity. So there was an energy crisis many decades ago. I mean, you can see photographs of cars lining up, 50 cars deep, waiting to get some fuel because fuel was in short supply. People were really concerned about what they should do to start to pay attention to their energy cost. Like home heating. So in our brilliance, we said what we need is to produce a retail energy store. In fact, we called it the energy store. And if we prove it here in Raleigh, then we can do dozens of these, maybe hundreds of these. Maybe we can franchise this concept all over the country, the energy store. So if an individual says, I need to conserve my cost of energy, I just go to the energy store. They'll fix it for me. So we will have the ability to install insulation for them. There are insulation contractors around. We'll be an insulation contractor. But in addition to that, they're losing energy around their door. We'll help them seal their doors. They're losing energy around their windows. We'll help them seal their windows. Maybe they need new windows. Maybe they need more energy efficient windows. And even back then, there were thermostats that would turn the temperature down at night and turn it back up in the daytime, and you could save money on energy by lower temperatures at night. We said we'll have everything in the store that can help the homeowner save money. So we took an administrative person from our distribution business and moved her over to run the office in this business. She'd do the accounting, She'd answer the phone. She'd take care of the customers that came into the front door that were in the display area. And then we hired the best salesman we knew. Your job's going to be to generate leads and to make sales and to build this business. And we opened the door. We signed a lease. We signed a 3-year lease. And we opened the door and nobody came. And this salesman, he said, well, what am I supposed to do? And we said, well, generate lead and make sales. Well, how do I do that? And we had done no proof of concept whatsoever. We had talked to no homeowners whatsoever. We just thought, we know this business.
Right.
We're smart enough. Open up a store and they will come. Or if they don't come, we'll figure out a way to get them to come. It was an unmitigated disaster. It was, from day one, it was loss after loss after loss after loss. We tried all kinds of different ways to generate leads. We were never particularly successful in doing it. 3 months later, we said we probably made a mistake. 6 months later, we got together with the guy we hired and we said, this just didn't work. And he said, you're telling me it's not working. It's a disaster. We closed the door. We eventually got a sublease to take part of the space, another sublease to take part of the space. We lost a lot of money. We lost a lot of money because we didn't do the work before opening the business that needed to be done. I see entrepreneurial opportunities today, particularly with students in NC State, and they want to go from concept to investor. What they're missing is from concept to potential customers to investor. Because when you talk to an investor, they're going to say, well, what's been your customer experience? What's been your investigation with customers? How many customers have you talked to? What are the customers telling you about your product or service? What are the customers telling you about your pricing? What are the customers telling you about your competition? Deep customer evaluation and examination is a critical part to any entrepreneurial experience. I learned it the hard way.
So with a lot of your early ventures, it seems like there were a lot of times that you were kind of thrust into roles that you didn't necessarily have experience with or were educated on before. So entrepreneurs today, they want to get into their venture, their concept, but there's a lot of components of the business that they might not see coming. So where have you experienced that, or where have you seen that before?
Yeah, I think that you're gonna fail. And learning how to, the current phrase is fail fast, is really important because it's going to tell you what you don't know and then maybe give you an opportunity to figure out what you need to know in order to solve the problem. Helping entrepreneurs today, I think, is not providing the answer. There aren't the answers. There are multiple answers, multiple options, multiple directions. One of the frequent questions is, how should I start my business? Do I do it myself? Or do I look for partners? And the answer is yes, because either one of those ways will work. If you do it yourself, you're responsible for managing your activities and managing the company, and you're going to be hiring different capabilities of things that you can't do well that other people can do better. And you don't have much money, so you're going to have to hire people that are interested in participating in the business, and maybe you need to give them stock options or something that helps them maybe get a benefit later on that they participate by being part of your concept. And I think as you grow the business, do you grow the business by giving equity to everybody that joins the business? Probably not. Maybe there are other ways of incentivizing people other than equity being the incentive. Lots of different directions, lots of different ways to make that work.
I think a lot of the younger generations of entrepreneurs wants to know just what you were talking about, what's the right thing to do. And they can often get hung up on that if they don't have the prior experience. And it sounds like, based on what you're saying, there is no one way to do it. There's a lot of growth channels and ways to get traction, but would you just advise someone who's asking those types of questions, just try and see?
Yeah, if you look at accelerators around the country, some accelerators encourage partnerships because they're looking for different talents and different people that are complementary to each other. They don't necessarily encourage equal partnerships. It can be very different ways. Actually, there's some accelerators that encourage the solo entrepreneur because they say, if you're really good at what you do, and if you have done an amazing amount of customer work, now I'm not talking about interaction with 10 potential customers, but 20, 50, 100 potential customers, maybe several hundred potential customers. So the customers have given you the roadmap of building this business. Now we can start talking about where you see the challenges and what kind of people you need to surround yourself with that help you overcome those challenges.
So we've talked about a lot of lessons you've learned along the way that kind of shaped your career path. What if there was one big takeaway that you could use as a piece of advice to budding entrepreneurs? What's the most important thing?
Well, first I would say is that the myth of the dominating, decision-making, controlling executive is just that. There's some people that are like that. I mean, I've known hundreds of people like that in consulting and investment banking. I've known lots of people in an entrepreneurial environment that appear to be that way. But if they're going to be successful over the long term, they've got to really learn that leadership is about helping other people. Leadership is first about helping your customer. You know, we hear people say today, our business is here to change the world. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're going to change the world, you're going to have to change your customer's world. You're going to have to help your customer win. So leadership is about trying to figure out how to help the customer win. Now, it gets more complicated than that. Leadership is about helping your suppliers win so that the suppliers want to do business with you. Leadership is about helping your employees win so that they're really excited about this business. They're excited about contributing to customer success. Leadership is eventually about helping your partners, if you have partners, helping your partners win. It's not just about me, it's about us. We're going to have conflict. We're absolutely going to have conflict. But how do we resolve the conflict in such a way that we win? And then it's about investors. If there are investors or if there are lenders, how do we get our investors and lenders to win? So the life lesson is leadership is about helping other people win. And I think, you know, if you back that up a little bit, then I think there's some other lessons that sort of are supportive of that, and that is what makes a person successful. If you ask highly successful business people, you know, simple questions like, how much of your business success is your smart, hard work, or did luck have anything to do with it? Most successful people will say luck had a lot to do with it. And they'll describe it something like this: I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. Or maybe what they're really saying is, I conspired to be at the right place at the right time. I would say a life lesson to me is that I recognize that the thousands of people that have impacted my life have a big part of any success that I've had, and I hope that I've had some ability to contribute to other people's success. And for NC State students, I would just encourage that their network activity becomes one of the most important things they do. Get to know different people with different skills and different capabilities that can help you find the way. You don't have to do it by yourself.
And so you're in a leadership role yourself right now as an investor. And so when you're looking around at a business that might come to you seeking investment, what do you look for? Whether that's from NC State graduates or anyone out there, what is it that you look for?
Well, it's interesting. I don't look at the concept first. I examine the individual first. I want to know, number one, how persistent they are, how determined they are. It's how persistent they are to get the interview, how persistent they are to make sure that they're there at the time they said they were going to be there, how persistent they are for follow-up. What kind of text or email follow-up do they provide? What kind of research do they do that they said they were going to do? You know, persistence and determination. That's my number one box. My second box is how good are they as a listener? Are they learning from other people? How good are they as a learner? How good are they at taking what somebody else has done and making that part of what they own for what they can do? And then last, how good are they as communicators? Can they take what they heard and what they learned, and can they communicate it to other people in a beneficial and entrepreneurial kind of way. Now let's talk about their concept. So I'm, as an investor, whether it's an NC State student or a serial investor that's been highly successful, I'm more interested in the individual first and the concept second.
So you're investing more in the team
Absolutely.
than the actual business.
Absolutely.
And so you gave a few years ago, you gave a gift to start the Andrews Accelerator program at NC State. And that houses a few new startups of recent Poole College graduates. And so what was your idea in starting that? What was the goal or purpose of that gift?
Well, I had a chance to spend a lot of time with NC State students that thought they had great ideas that they wanted to develop. Unfortunately, those great ideas often died in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
They said, I'd really like to pursue that, but I've got this thing called student debt, and it's going to have to be paid back, and I'm not sure how I'm going to pay it back, and I need a job.
Right.
Or maybe, particularly for graduate students, I now have a spouse, and I need to support her or him, and also maybe at some point their kids. I got family, I got obligations, I've got debt, and I'd like to be an entrepreneur, but I need income. So I'm not really sure I'll ever consider a startup. So there's some flaws in that. Number one, it is possible as a student to build a business. And it is possible to find a business that eventually will generate some customers, some income, and eventually some investors. It is possible to do that. It's also possible to take a job and work part-time on your entrepreneurial idea while you're working full-time in a job. I remember the founder of the old motel chain, Holiday Inns, was asked one time what made him successful. And he said, I tell people you really don't have to work more than about half time to be successful. He says, if you'll give it 12 hours a day for 7 days a week, you'll do okay. And I think what he was saying is there's plenty of time, even if you have a job, to work a second job of developing a new business. And so I said, I need to help these students that are thinking about their really hopeful, neat, special idea of building a business, so that some of them might be able to do it while they're still in school or after they graduate, and those that don't might be able to come back to it by continuing to work on it after they graduate from NC State. What do they need? Well, some of them need some cash.
Right.
I mentioned earlier, maybe I need somebody to develop an app for me in my business. And if I go to the most affordable app developer I can find, and they're going to give me part of their time, it's still going to cost me a few $1,000s to get them to pay any attention to me. I don't have a few $1,000s. Maybe our fund could help with that. Maybe we can provide some starter money to get people beginning the quest for their entrepreneurial journey. But I said, there's more to it than that. It's not just some cash, it's also some coaching. We need an accelerator to give people 3-6 months and then maybe 12-24 months of exposure to people in the NC State community that can provide some additional insight and to help them solve some of the problems, help them find some of the answers, help them make contacts with some of the people they need to make. And the entrepreneurial program at NC State has done a great job of building a base of mentors, 40, 50, 60 people that are highly talented in a variety of different areas that are very excited about helping the NC State community. And so what I've hoped that I have accomplished is to help stimulate, with a little bit of cash and with a lot of other people helping, to develop an accelerator program that takes them beyond the idea to try to start to prove their concepts.
Well, Chip, thank you so much again for coming and joining me for this conversation. It's been extremely interesting and insightful to hear about your experiences in entrepreneurship.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.